previous episode, we saw how a trading robot works, and we created a plug-and-play robot. Hi, I am the Quant. In this episode, I am going to show you how to create money management inside your plug-and-play robot on Ctrader. To begin, we're going to go straight into the logical core of our robot. I'm going to show you an example that you absolutely must remember, because we'll use it later. The variables you'll use in the robot are the following. Int returns whole numbers. Double returns decimal numbers. Bool returns true or false. And string returns text. If I add a decimal point to an int, we clearly get an error. However, if I remove the decimal part from a double, it still works. Same thing for bool. If it's not true or false, it doesn't work. And for string, you need to know that all text values are written between quotation marks. Good, let's build this and check the log. We can see that everything is displayed. Back to the code, I'm going to show you another type of variable. var. var has the ability to adapt to all the other types because it detects the type based on what you put after the word equals. Let's add it and see what happens. Important. If you use var and you initialize it to 0, you will get an integer. To force it to be a double, you must add a digit after the decimal point. Now that you have the basics, let's go back to the robot, and we're going to start by working on the logical core of the robot to improve the architecture. In programming, the goal is to have code that is easy to understand. We're going to start by creating a function that returns +1 or -1, the getSignal function, with a data series parameter. The data series is our plug-and-play indicator. You can see there's an error here. That's because this function is supposed to return an int, but we're not returning anything at all. So for now, let's add return 0. Just below, we can see another function. It's a void. This type of function doesn't return anything. It simply executes code. Remember this, a void executes, and a function with a variable type sends a value back. Now that we have our function, we're going to create the logical core. I take the conditions from onBarClosed, and I add them into the function. So we need to replace signal.result with indicator. Then, instead of calling close positions and execute market order, we simply return a value, +1 for buy, -1 for sell, and else for all the other cases that we don't mention. Be careful. Inside this function, you are required to return a value even when the conditions are not met. Look, if I remove the else return, we get an error. Now that we have our getSignal function, we're going to add it inside the body of onBarClosed. So the new condition becomes, if getSignal of signal.result equals 1. And else if getSignal of signal.result equals -1. Now we're going to create an open position function. Just like close position, it will be a void. The parameters will be trade type, symbol name, and volume. I add execute market order inside open position, and I pass these parameters into the function. Now, if we add a comma after volume, we can see several extra options appear. Stop loss, take profit, comment. This is used to add a comment to a position, but I'll leave it as null. Then trailing stop and stop loss trigger method. The stop loss trigger method lets you adjust your stop loss based on the ask and the bid. For a buy position, one will close on the ask, the other on the bid. And for the double options, it waits for 2 ticks as confirmation below or above the level. This helps avoid being stopped out by a single tick. Now that we understand these possibilities, we're going to create stop loss, take profit, and trailing stop parameters. Let's go back to the top of the code and set them up. The stop loss and take profit were doubles, meaning decimal values, and the trailing stop is a bool, so it can only be true or false. And now we're going to add them to the parameters. Okay, now that our function is finished, we're going to replace execute market order with open position. As you can see, everything works because we created a function that uses the same parameters as execute market order. To finish, we're going to create a new parameter, close on opposite signal. Before adding stop loss, take profit, and trailing stop, our robot would close its positions as soon as an opposite signal appeared. Now that we added these features, it still continues anyway. I'm going to show you how to fix that. Go to the parameters and create a bool called close on opposite signal with the default value set to false. Then we simply add an if, close on opposite signal. This means, if it's true, we continue. If it's false, we skip the following actions. We do the same for sell. And that's it. We've completed our first money management system for this robot. Let's run an optimization to see the results. You need to know that during an optimization, the steps represent how the values increase. In this case, I'm changing them to go faster because I'm going to raise the stop loss and take profit values. I leave trailing stop on yes and no so both methods can be analyzed. Then I increase the periods, and I set the standard deviation to 0.1. It doesn't need to be that low, and I set it to 3 because in this strategy we want the Bollinger Bands to be touched. Then I set the lots to 1, and here we go. You can see all sorts of results, but you'll notice that the optimizations become profitable very quickly, and the drawdown is not surprising at all. The optimization is expected to take around 4 minutes, so I fast forward and we continue right after. Okay, the result is exceptional. 88% profit in 1 month, with a drawdown of 7.57. Here is what this strategy is telling us. The equity curve looks very clean. The statistics table shows the total number of trades and how many were profitable. Let's look at the win rate. (79.34% wins on Euro USD. Let's check the history. It's a very strong setup, with consistent gains. Now let's look at the parameters. Here we can see that close on opposite is enabled, so the optimizer found a setup where it was useful. The parameters make sense. A large stop loss, a large take profit, a very short period to get more trades, a small deviation, and the calculation based on double exponential. Let's apply these parameters and check the backtest. We are in tick mode, using real data. I add the indicators, and I leave visual mode on until the end. That's everything for this episode. If you enjoyed this and you want to go further, make sure to subscribe and like this video. If you have any questions, join us on Discord. This was the Quant. Enjoy the rest of the video.